At 69, Maureen McCormick finally tells the truth about David Cassidy. Maureen Denise McCormick was born on August 5, 1956, in sunny Encino, California. Long before she became America's favorite daughter, she was just a regular kid from a middle-class family, chasing butterflies and singing into hairbrushes, never knowing millions of people would one day know her face. Her parents saw something special, that spark you can't teach. By the time she was 12, she was already on TV, flashing that unmistakable smile in commercials for Barbie dolls and peanut butter. Everyone saw her as the perfect little girl, but behind those bright eyes was a hunger to be seen for who she really was. And that's where the story starts, the rise of a child star who would one day lose herself in the glare of fame. And, decades later, tell the truth about the one person who understood that loneliness better than anyone else. David Cassidy. But before that moment ever came, Maureen's life was about to change forever. It was 1969, a wild, changing America. Woodstock, the moon landing, and on TV, a wholesome little show about a blended family that would quietly rewrite television history. When Maureen McCormick walked onto the set of The Brady Bunch, she wasn't just acting. She was stepping into a role that would define a generation. Marcia Brady, beautiful, confident, and endlessly put together. To the world, she was perfection. To Maureen, it was a mask she had to wear every single day. Behind the laughter and the family-friendly scripts, the pressure was brutal. There were cameras, rehearsals, interviews, and no space to make mistakes. Everyone expected her to be Marcia. Even when the director yelled cut, she was praised for being the all-American dream girl, while inside, she was quietly breaking under the weight of it. Everywhere she went, fans screamed her name. Magazines wrote about her hair, her smile, her wholesome image. But Hollywood has a dark side, especially for kids who grow up too fast. Maureen was learning that fame doesn't love you back. It just keeps taking. And while the world was obsessed with the Brady family, another young star, just as adored, just as trapped, was about to step into her orbit. His name was David Cassidy, and together they would share a secret connection that neither fame nor time could erase. But first, Maureen had to survive the illusion that made her famous. It was 1969, a wild, changing America. Woodstock, the moon landing, and on TV, a wholesome little show about a blended family that would quietly rewrite television history. When Maureen McCormick walked onto the set of The Brady Bunch, she wasn't just acting. She was stepping into a role that would define a generation. Marcia Brady, beautiful, confident, and endlessly put together. To the world, she was perfection. To Maureen, it was a mask she had to wear every single day. Behind the laughter and the family-friendly scripts, the pressure was brutal. There were cameras, rehearsals, interviews, and no space to make mistakes. Everyone expected her to be Marcia. Even when the director yelled cut, she was praised for being the all-American dream girl. While inside, she was quietly breaking under the weight of it. Everywhere she went, fans screamed her name. Magazines wrote about her hair, her smile, her wholesome image. But Hollywood has a dark side, especially for kids who grow up too fast. Maureen was learning that fame doesn't love you back. It just keeps taking. And while the world was obsessed with the Brady family, another young star, just as adored, just as trapped, was about to step into her orbit. His name was David Cassidy, and together they would share a secret connection that neither fame nor time could erase. But first, Maureen had to survive the illusion that made her famous. By the early 1970s, The Brady Bunch wasn't just a TV show, it was a movement. It turned suburban family life into something magical, something millions of people wanted to be part of. And at the center of it all, Maureen McCormick, the flawless smiling face of Marcia. To fans, she was Marcia Brady, the perfect daughter, the perfect sister, the perfect American dream. But what no one knew was that perfection came with a price. Behind the pastel walls of the Brady home, real life was much darker. The studio controlled every part of Maureen's image, her clothes, her interviews, even her smile. Producers warned her to never look tired, never seem unhappy, and never show weakness. And for a teenage girl growing up in front of millions, that pressure was crushing. Imagine being told that your real self, the messy, complicated, emotional self, wasn't marketable. That if you weren't smiling, you were replaceable. That's the world Maureen was living in, every single day. But here's the twist. The more the world adored her, the less she recognized herself. Every rerun, every poster, every autograph session pulled her further away from the girl she used to be. And deep down, Maureen was beginning to feel it. That quiet emptiness fame leaves when the cameras go dark. Still, she kept pushing. She did her job. She smiled. Because in Hollywood, the show never stops, even when your heart's breaking. But what Maureen didn't know was that somewhere across town, another young star was living the exact same lie. Someone who knew what it meant to fake a smile for the world. Someone who, just like her, was drowning in fame. And soon, their lives would collide in a way that would change them both forever. While Maureen was America's good girl, David Cassidy was its golden boy. The heartthrob every teenager dreamed about, the superstar who seemed untouchable. He starred in The Partridge Family, and when he sang, the world stopped to listen. Every concert was chaos. Oceans of screaming fans, fainting girls, flashing cameras. He couldn't walk down a street without being mobbed. He couldn't have dinner without someone asking for an autograph. To everyone else, he had it all. But to David, the fame that made him rich also made him a prisoner. Behind the glitter and guitars, he was lonely. He'd later admit he felt like a product, packaged, polished, and sold to the public. Sound familiar? It should. Because while David was battling his golden cage existence, Maureen was living the same nightmare in a different studio. They were two sides of the same coin, the teen idols of an era that didn't believe stars were allowed to be human. Both young, both adored, both aching for someone who could see past the image. When their paths finally crossed at publicity events and industry gatherings, the connection was instant. Not romantic at first, just an unspoken understanding. They were surrounded by noise but found silence in each other. They were surrounded by fans but felt completely alone. David made Maureen laugh when she forgot how. And for the first time in years, she met someone who didn't expect her to be perfect. They shared something rare in Hollywood. Honesty. And that honesty would become the beginning of a secret that would last a lifetime. But as their bond deepened, the outside world was about to turn it into something far bigger and far more dangerous than either of them could control. Hollywood in the early 70s was electric, the kind of place where everyone looked like they were living a dream, but most were just trying to survive it. Maureen McCormick and David Cassidy were both at the top of their worlds, yet both secretly falling apart inside theirs. Their first real meeting wasn't planned. It happened at a press event packed with cameras, fans, and flashing lights. She was there as America's sweetheart, and he was the idol every girl wished she could have. But when their eyes met, the noise of the room seemed to fade away. David smiled at her, not the staged, poster smile he gave photographers, but something softer. Maureen later said that in that moment, he made me feel like a person again. For two people constantly performing, that was everything. They began seeing each other at industry events, charity galas, TV tapings, the occasional party hidden away in the Hollywood hills. No scripts, no handlers, no cameras. Just two young souls talking about what it felt like to be trapped by their own fame. He joked about the chaos of his concerts. She confessed that she sometimes hated being Marsha Brady. They laughed, they shared, and slowly, the walls between them fell away. But in the world they lived in, even friendship could be dangerous. Their fans didn't want them to be real. They wanted them to stay frozen in fantasy, the perfect boy and girl who belonged to everyone but themselves. So they kept their connection private, protecting it like a fragile secret. Still, Hollywood has a way of finding out what it's not supposed to know. And soon, whispers began to spread. But here's the thing about whispers in Hollywood. They don't stay quiet for long. It started with a single headline. Marsha Brady and Keith Partridge are TV sweethearts more than friends. And just like that, the story exploded. Every magazine, every radio show, every gossip column wanted a piece of it. Teen magazines dissected every glance, every photo, every moment they'd ever shared in public. And for two people who were just trying to hold on to something genuine, it felt like a nightmare. Fans didn't just speculate, they fantasized. They wrote fan fiction, sent letters, begged for confirmation. They wanted to believe that Maureen and David were living out the ultimate 1970s love story. The Brady Girl and the Partridge Boy. It was the crossover nobody asked for, but everyone secretly wanted. Behind closed doors, though, it wasn't glamorous. Maureen was under strict studio control. Her image had to stay pure. Executives warned her that even the idea of a relationship with David could ruin her reputation. David faced the same pressure. Managers reminded him that being a teen idol meant staying available for his fans. So they stayed quiet. No photos, no public appearances together. Only stolen moments, shared laughs, whispered secrets, fleeting glances that carried the weight of everything they couldn't say. Maureen would later admit, "Yes, David and I had a connection. It wasn't long, but it was real." And that one line, decades later, confirmed what fans had suspected all along. But back then, silence was survival. They couldn't be honest without risking everything. So they hid it, both of them pretending to live perfect lives while carrying a secret that would haunt them for decades. And as the tabloids kept spinning fantasies, Maureen's real life was starting to fall apart behind the scenes. Fame was turning from a dream into a cage. And the girl who once smiled for every camera was beginning to lose herself completely. But that was only the beginning of her fall. The cameras stopped rolling, but the mask didn't come off. For Maureen McCormick, silence became a survival tactic. Every morning, she'd wake up and become Marsha Brady. Not because she wanted to, but because the world needed her to. Every interview had to sound cheerful. Every smile had to look perfect. The truth? She was exhausted. She was tired of pretending. Tired of being told what to say, how to dress, how to act. Tired of watching herself become a character she no longer recognized. When the show ended in 1974, Maureen thought freedom would finally feel good. But instead, it felt like falling. The phone stopped ringing. The scripts stopped coming. And the world that had once worshipped her moved on. Just like that. Imagine that. At 18, you've already lived your dream, and now it's over. The silence after fame is deafening, and for someone who'd spent her whole life performing, the quiet was unbearable. That's when the cracks began to show. Maureen started disappearing, into parties, into the Hollywood night, into herself. Behind the glamour, behind the nostalgia, she was breaking in ways no one could see. She didn't talk about it. She couldn't. Because to admit the truth, that she wasn't okay, would destroy the perfect image that everyone still expected her to be. So she did what child stars were taught to do in the 70s. Smile, pretend, survive. But inside, a storm was building. And soon it would pull her into one of the darkest chapters of her life. The headlines never told this part of the story. While fans remembered her as the golden girl of the Brady Bunch, Maureen McCormick was fighting a private war, one that nearly killed her. Hollywood has always been a place that eats its young. And for Maureen, the pressure, the loneliness, the emptiness left by fame, it all became too heavy. She turned to anything that made the pain fade, even for a few hours. First parties, then pills, then cocaine. What started as escape turned into addiction. She once confessed, "There were nights I didn't know if I'd live to see morning." Every hit was a way to silence the noise in her head, the self-doubt, the guilt, the feeling that she'd lost control of her own life. The girl America had grown up watching was now trapped in a nightmare no one could see. There were moments of pure desperation, times when she showed up to auditions high, when directors looked at her with pity instead of admiration. She even said she once traded intimacy for drugs, not for pleasure, but just to survive another night. And yet, the saddest part wasn't the addiction. It was the loneliness. Because in Hollywood, everyone loves you when you're shining. But when you start to fall, they look the other way. Her friends drifted off. Her phone stopped ringing. Even her family didn't know how to reach her anymore. She was disappearing, not just from the industry, but from herself. The Marsha Brady the world adored was gone. In her place stood a woman, trying desperately to remember who she really was. But in the darkness, there was still one faint flickering light. A memory of the connection she once had with David Cassidy. Because if anyone could understand the loneliness of fame, it was him. And soon, their stories and their struggles would mirror each other in heartbreaking ways. Every story about fame has a breaking point. For Maureen McCormick, it came quietly. No cameras, no headlines, just a moment of truth in the middle of chaos. She'd hit rock bottom. The gigs were gone. The money was fading. The people who once called her America's sweetheart didn't call it all anymore. She was alone, broke, and lost, a ghost of the girl she used to be. One night, she looked in the mirror and barely recognized the person staring back. The sparkle in her eyes, gone. The innocence, long erased. And in that silence, she realized something terrifying. If she didn't stop now, she wouldn't live to see another birthday. That was the moment everything changed. She reached out to her parents, to her faith, to anyone who would listen. And for the first time, people didn't just see Marsha Brady, they saw Maureen, the woman underneath the character. Her family stood by her. Her father, heartbroken but hopeful, begged her to get help, and she did. Rehab wasn't glamorous. It was brutal. Withdrawal, therapy, tears, days that felt endless, nights that felt like they'd never end. But she kept going. One day at a time, one choice at a time. And slowly, she started coming back. She found love. Real love. When she met Michael Cummings, a man who didn't care about fame or reruns or nostalgia. He saw her, flaws and all, and stayed anyway. He became her anchor, her partner, the quiet voice that reminded her she was more than her past. Together, they rebuilt a life from the ashes. It wasn't easy and it wasn't perfect, but it was real. And for the first time in decades, Maureen wasn't acting anymore. She was living. Still, there was one story she hadn't told. One truth she'd carried silently through all those years. A truth about David Cassidy, and the connection that had shaped both their lives in ways neither of them fully understood. And when she finally spoke about it, almost 50 years later, it changed everything. Every story about fame has a breaking point. For Maureen McCormick, it came quietly. No cameras, no headlines, just a moment of truth in the middle of chaos. She'd hit rock bottom. The gigs were gone. The money was fading. The people who once called her America's sweetheart didn't call it all anymore. She was alone, broke, and lost, a ghost of the girl she used to be. One night, she looked in the mirror and barely recognized the person staring back. The sparkle in her eyes, gone. The innocence, long erased. And in that silence, she realized something terrifying. If she didn't stop now, she wouldn't live to see another birthday. That was the moment everything changed. She reached out, to her parents, to her faith, to anyone who would listen. And for the first time, people didn't just see Marsha Brady, they saw Maureen, the woman underneath the character. Her family stood by her. Her father, heartbroken but hopeful, begged her to get help, and she did. Rehab wasn't glamorous. It was brutal. Withdrawal, therapy, tears. Days that felt endless, nights that felt like they'd never end. But she kept going. One day at a time, one choice at a time. And slowly, she started coming back. She found love, real love, when she met Michael Cummings, a man who didn't care about fame or reruns or nostalgia. He saw her, flaws and all, and stayed anyway. He became her anchor, her partner, the quiet voice that reminded her she was more than her past. Together, they rebuilt a life from the ashes. It wasn't easy and it wasn't perfect, but it was real. And for the first time in decades, Maureen wasn't acting anymore. She was living. Still, there was one story she hadn't told, one truth she'd carried silently through all those years. A truth about David Cassidy, and the connection that had shaped both their lives in ways neither of them fully understood. And when she finally spoke about it, almost 50 years later, it changed everything. When Maureen McCormick finally opened up about David Cassidy, it wasn't the kind of tell-all the tabloids had waited decades for. It was something much more human, quiet, tender, and deeply reflective. She spoke about him the way people talk about someone they never truly got over. There was warmth in her smile and sorrow behind her eyes. She remembered the first time she met him. That electric charm, the easy laugh, the way he seemed untouchable. Until you saw the sadness he hid behind the spotlight. He was magnetic, she said softly, but he carried a weight most people never saw. Back then, David Cassidy was the face on every magazine cover, The voice in every teenage girl's bedroom, the golden boy who couldn't go anywhere without being mobbed by screaming fans. And yet, Maureen said he was lonely. Fame had a cruel way of making him feel adored and isolated all at once. And that's where they connected. Because she knew that feeling too. On the surface, she was the perfect girl next door. But behind closed doors, she was crumbling. And somehow, in those moments when the camera stopped rolling, David saw her for who she really was. Not Marsha Brady, but Maureen. They would talk for hours about everything. The pressure, the fear of fading away, the way Hollywood made them grow up too fast. It wasn't about romance, not really. It was about two souls clinging to each other in a world that didn't care about who they truly were. He understood me, she said, her voice breaking slightly. We were just two kids trying to survive something bigger than us. And even though their connection was brief, it left a permanent mark. She admitted that sometimes, years later, she'd see a photo of him or hear one of his songs, and that familiar ache would come back. Not regret, but remembrance. She carried that memory quietly for decades. Because no matter how much time passed, no one could ever replace what they shared. A rare, fleeting understanding between two stars who burned too bright, too young. But then, David's story took a heartbreaking turn, and Maureen would find herself facing the same demons he once fought. David Cassidy's later years were marked by a slow, public unraveling. The same fame that once made him a global icon eventually tore him apart. Alcohol, exhaustion, broken relationships, his private pain became headlines. When news broke of his declining health, Maureen said it hit her harder than she expected. She hadn't spoken to him in years, but it was as if time folded in on itself. All those memories came rushing back. The laughter, the quiet talks, the shared loneliness. I wanted to reach out, she admitted, but part of me was afraid. Afraid he wouldn't remember me the same way. Afraid it was too late. And then, one day, it was too late. When David Cassidy passed in 2017, Maureen said it felt like losing a part of her own history. She cried, not as a fan, but as someone who once stood beside him when they both had the world at their feet. In interviews afterward, she spoke about that pain with a kind of wisdom that only comes from survival. Fame can destroy you, she said. It makes you forget who you are, until there's almost nothing left. David and I both fought those battles, just in different ways. She talked about how addiction, depression, and pressure can blur the line between reality and performance, and how the same thing that brings adoration can also bring ruin. But where David's story ended in heartbreak, Maureen's took a different turn. She found recovery, she found love, and she found peace. Something David never fully got the chance to hold on to. I wish he could have seen what I see now, she said softly. That there's life after the spotlight. That it's okay to step away and just be human. Her words weren't filled with regret. They were filled with empathy. Because she knew exactly how close she'd come to the same fate. It's what makes her story, and his, so hauntingly connected. Two people, two lives, forever bound by the dangerous beauty of fame. And though the lights went out for David, Maureen still carries his spark. A reminder that even in the darkest chapters, you can still find your way back to the light. Decades of fame, heartbreak, and survival left Maureen McCormick with something few could claim. Perspective. She's seen what happens when the world's love comes with strings, and she survived when others might have fallen forever. I learned that fame is a fragile thing, she said. It can lift you higher than you ever imagined, but it can also drop you in a place so dark you wonder if you'll ever climb out. Every struggle, the addiction, the heartbreak, the silent longing for David Cassidy became part of her roadmap. She learned to separate the person from the persona, the love from the illusion, and the hope from the expectation. She also discovered the power of forgiveness, not just for others, but for herself. For decades, she carried guilt and regret for choices she felt had failed her, for letting fame dictate her life, for the years lost to addiction, for the silence she kept about her connection with David. But in the end, she realized that those choices didn't define her. Her survival did. Her courage to tell her truth, even decades later, did. And she has a message for anyone who's ever felt trapped by circumstances beyond their control. You don't have to stay in the cage, she said. You can rebuild. You can recover. You can be more than what they wrote about you. Maureen's story is proof that even the brightest star can stumble and rise again. That even a life shaped by the glare of fame can find peace in its shadows. But there's one more chapter, a chapter that ties everything together. The tribute, the love, and the legacy of the connection that started it all. At 69, Maureen finally spoke openly about David Cassidy, not to chase headlines, but to honor a connection that shaped her life. Her words weren't scandalous. They weren't salacious. They were human. She painted him as more than a teen idol, a complex, sensitive, flawed, and remarkable man. He was funny, generous, and he carried a weight most people never saw, she recalled. By sharing their story, she reclaimed it from the tabloids and the rumors. She reminded fans that their connection wasn't about fleeting fame or forbidden romance. It was about understanding. It was about two people navigating the whirlwind of stardom and finding a brief moment of realness in each other. And in that honesty, she created something lasting, not just for herself, but for him, for the fans, and for anyone who's ever felt alone in the spotlight. It's a reminder that behind the glamour, behind the posters, behind the smiles, real people live, struggle, love, and heal. Maureen McCormick's story is a testament to resilience. It's about surviving what the world throws at you, facing your demons, and finally telling your truth, no matter how late. And as she speaks of David Cassidy, she doesn't just remember a connection lost in time. She celebrates it, she honors it, and she shows us all that it's never too late to find peace with your past, embrace your truth, and shine on your own terms. Because at the end of the day, fame fades, the cameras turn off, but the heart, the real heart, remembers. And that heart is where the story truly lives. Looking back, Maureen McCormick's life reads like a Hollywood screenplay, full of highs, lows, triumphs, and heartbreak. But unlike most stories told in tabloids, hers isn't about drama for the sake of drama. It's about truth. She has seen the seductive shine of fame and felt its crushing weight. She has loved, lost, and made mistakes that could have ended her story before it truly began. Yet, she survived. She rebuilt her life from the fragments left behind by a childhood spent in the glare of cameras and a world obsessed with perfection. Maureen reflects not with bitterness, but with clarity. She knows now that every struggle shaped her, every fall taught her resilience, every heartbreak taught her empathy, and every secret she carried made her stronger. Even her connection with David Cassidy, once a secret she feared might destroy her image, now stands as a testament to the raw human truth behind the glitter. It reminds her and all of us that real life doesn't fit neatly into scripts or sound bites. Love, loss, mistakes, and forgiveness. That's the real story. And as she tells it decades later, it's a gift to anyone who feels trapped, judged, or invisible. You can survive. You can reclaim your story. And you can find your own peace. Today, Maureen McCormick's legacy is bigger than Marsha Brady or any headline ever written about her. It's a story of resilience, of courage, of truth. Her journey teaches us that fame is fleeting, but authenticity lasts. That connection matters more than applause. That even in a world obsessed with perfection, it's the messy, human parts of our lives that leave the deepest mark. By sharing her story, the highs, the lows, and the secret bond with David Cassidy, Maureen isn't just revisiting the past. She's shining a light for anyone who feels invisible in the spotlight or crushed by expectation. Her words remind us that it's never too late to reclaim your life, speak your truth, and honor the people who mattered most to you. And in the quiet spaces between fame and memory, Maureen reminds us what matters: compassion, honesty, love, and the courage to live as your real self, even when the world only wants the fantasy. Her story lingers long after the credits roll. It's not a story of perfection, it's a story of survival, of growth, and of the rare beauty that comes when someone dares to be real. And perhaps most importantly, it's a story that whispers to all of us. Even in the brightest spotlight, even in the darkest times, the human heart endures, and it remembers. If Maureen's story moved you, hit that like button. It's the easiest way to show support for stories that matter. And don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the lives of Hollywood legends. The stories behind the smiles, the struggles behind the spotlight. Have thoughts about Maureen and David Cassidy's story? Drop a comment below and share your perspective. We love hearing your insights. And if you really want to stay updated, turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story that uncovers the truth behind the fame. Because behind every star, there's a story worth knowing. And yours might just inspire the next one.